What's up, everybody? I'm Thomas J. Bellezza, and welcome to another episode of The Right Mindset. Today's lesson is going to be about what makes dialogue effective in novels. Some of the things we're going to touch on are how to show more with less. When you write, you are the character. If you work your dialogue, the flow is there. And how sometimes information is just information. Let's get right to it. Ooh, yeah. Today's lesson is, as I said, what makes dialogue effective in novels. Now, before we get into it, hey, come on, if you're a beginner writer, advanced writer, you're writing author, you're a screenwriter, whatever you do, if you write, and you like the content you're seeing, hit subscribe and press that bell icon so you don't miss out. As always, this channel goes over lessons for our craft, analyzing and reviewing story, and having interviews with other writers. Say more with less. Let's do it. This doesn't mean write as little as possible. It means whatever you do write has it say more and something of worth, right? So if we just write, we can't just have it be words. Can't just be something that's happening. There has to be some level of purpose to the move, to the direction. Even if it's, why did they choose to make coffee? Because everything has a motivation to it. Why do they drink that coffee? Is it a part of a habit? Is it a part of, this is their wake-up process? Well, if that is, that's character. There's reason for that. I don't drink coffee in the morning. Some people don't drink coffee in the morning. Some people don't drink coffee at all. So for them to choose it, it's telling you something of the character. So, again, say more with less doesn't mean write as little as possible. It means whatever you do write has to say something of worth. Worth would include, but not limited to, revealing background, conveying character, and the relationship between certain characters. Now, again, effectively, by doing this, you're effectively creating or resolving tension. You're allowing the narrative to move forward, which in turn divulges potential plot information or pertinent, depending. What would make dialogue effective? Well, first, no small talk. We've talked about that numerous times, as small talk creates small moments. And you want to use several of the above elements in a moment or throughout a conversation, meaning, again, if they're just talking because the story needs to, hey, by the way, if we don't get A before B happens, C will happen. That's the scene. That's the only reason the scene was created. You're not saying anything of worth. It's just, I need this to get out, and boom. So nothing's happening. We're not developing character. We're not developing relationship. We're not divulging behavior. So you never want dialogue to be, and as I always do, hey, Jack, what's up? Nothing much. How's Claire doing? She's good. Instead, Darren paused at the sight of Jack in his kitchen. Didn't you I'll read that again. Darren paused at the sight of Jack in his kitchen. Didn't expect you here till 3. That's the pro of being friends since college. I keep you on your toes. Now, in 2 lines, we've already conveyed several elements. We've revealed backstory, conveyed character, and the relationship between Darren and Jack. We created a sense of tension, divulged plot information about they were going to meet at 3, and in a 3rd line, the narrative would have been moved forward with potentially I thought Claire was coming with us to dinner, which would then add another plot stream. So again, the lines were Darren paused at the sight of Jack in his kitchen. Didn't expect you here till 3. That that's the pro of being friends since college. I keep you on your toes. Obviously, we don't have to say said Jack because Jack is mentioned in Darren's. We set up Darren pause at the sight of Jack in his kitchen. So we set up Darren, and Darren said, "Didn't expect you here till 3." So we know that Jack is responding. That's advanced writing for those taglines. You don't always have to say he said, she said. Anyway, think of effective dialogue as having purpose while also being succinct in its presentation. This means you can have a meaty chunk of dialogue in a scene as long as you trim the fat to ensure something is really being said. Now, in that example, hey Jack, what's up? Nothing much. How's Claire? How's Claire doing? She's good. Nothing is really. We're getting one piece of information out of that, which is Claire is of interest. Uh, they're talking to each other and it's about Claire. But in that other piece, we're adding all those other elements where Darren paused at the sight of Jack. So he's like, hey, didn't expect you here till 3. That's the pro of being friends since college. I keep you on your toes. And then even after that, you could have I thought Claire was coming with us to dinner. And it's like, well, she said no. You want dialogue, even one line or two lines, to really have substance to it. Sometimes subtext, whatever the case may be. All right. So how do we find a lot of this? Well, you are your character. You have to know what your characters are going to say, which means you need to know what your characters know. However, your characters shouldn't know what you know. More so, characters should only know what they know based on who, what, where, why, and how they are involved in A, the story, and B, their backstory leading to that very moment. Backstory? That's right. Characters don't need elaborate backstories that allow you to know every little detail, but you want to know enough to give them depth. Of course, this information might never come to be in the novel itself, but it will influence the characters' choices and how you move them around in the scene. What they do for a living, their interests, are all going to influence their motivations to take action or not, or how they are capable or not. A quick run through of those thoughts. What they do for a living is the same as what they do for a living would be the same as if they are training for a marathon. If they are an amazing bard, they've had a crush on their neighbors since the 2nd grade. All these little elements create purpose in choice. So if I made a living as a CIA agent, specifically a spy, but maybe I'm not a field spy, maybe I'm a espionage spy or whatever the case may be, right? I had come with skill sets. If I'm training for a marathon, I come with skill sets. I come with drive, motivations. If I'm a bard, I have something that drives me for that. Like I have a different life than the marathon runner. However, I could be an amazing bard who decides to do a marathon, and that is a different character than just the character who wants to do a marathon. These small details leak into a character and who they are, and they are very telling of who they are and why they are. Now, their background and their interests can be in stages too. It's their first marathon, or it's their 20th marathon. The amazing bard learned on their own, or maybe they were taught by the greatest bard ever. That crush is Mary Jane Watson, and she's in trouble. She's in a terrible relationship with Flash Thompson, and her father is abusive. Well, those elements make Mary Jane Watson somebody very specific in that situation. Okay? But how she reacts to it also defines her as a character. By the way, I made that one up. There is I've never seen a story with Mary Jane Watson, Flash Thompson, and abusive father, Spider-Man one. For Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Anyway, spoilers. These elements are effectively pulled from their personal arcs, plots, conflicts, and character. This is how we learn what they know. The knowledge that comes from their experiences and expertise will influence conversation. This is why when Peter Parker speaks, he has a bit of intelligence behind it, but he is also very shy, unless he is A, in his environment of expertise, meaning when he's speaking with Doc Octopus about science, or B, his face is covered with the Spider-Man mask, which gives him confidence to be someone else. An important side note, know what they know. You have to know what they know. You need to know what your characters know. If your character is a scientist, have an understanding of their knowledge so you can filter the expertise through dialogue and action and reaction. Effective dialogue is going to begin and end with your knowledge and use of the words of that character's world. A person who is a sailor is going to talk differently and have a knowledge of expertise than someone who's a race car driver who doesn't like the water. Now, another part about dialogue is the flow is there. And what does that mean? It means in a novel, there is dialogue and then there is narrative, and not narration, the narrative, and you want them to play nice together. Effective dialogue can benefit from a dance between the narrative prose and the dialogue itself. There should be a seamless movement between the two of them that effectively pulls us through the moment. How do you know if it's working? Well, dialogue should rise out of any narrative prose and then be able to sit back right into place. This is accomplished with read throughs, programs where you can hear it, or you have other people read it out loud to you. So it's good to read it out loud. It's good to hear it read out loud. What might a good flow versus bad flow be? Well, with that said, let me do something for you. Let me do something for you. Ooh, doo, 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 doo. Okay. Bow, 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 bow. Here you go. Here you go. Here you go. Share that screen. All right. Present. Boop. Okay. Let's get rid of this. Let's go down here. How's that look? Good. Get that as big as possible. For you. For you. For you are the best around. All right. There you go. Okay. All right, so this would be a good read. A good read might look like this. I have zero interest in going back to the dorm. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, Julia professed. Tonight, I'm not a student. I'm here enjoying the nightlife with my bestie. She began to cry and then stopped herself. I'm just one of 1,000 students. Yet, she wipes her eyes dry. Woe is me, right? Julia sat back in her chair. Okay, so the reason this is good or potentially good is because we have dialogue that moves with the narrative. Let's color that in for you so you can see. She wiped her tears. Okay, and then if we want, we could do this with the dialogue. With dialogue. Look at the dialogue. Oh wait. This is actually light blue. All right. So what I'm doing here is I'm letting you see the visuals of each thing. Woe is me, mofo. All right. So I want to make it a little bit bigger. Yeah. Boop. Okay. Right. Looks good. All right. I have zero interest in going back to the dorm. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Julie professed, tonight I'm not a student. I'm here enjoying the nightlife with my bestie. She began to cry and then stopped herself. I'm just one of 1,000 students. Yet she wipes her tears dry. Woe's me, right? Julia sat back in her chair. A lot is going on there. There's a lot of emotion going on. All right. Using the same above, this might be an example of a bad read. What is that, 11? You got to put it to 11. I have zero interest in going back. She raised her nose up at her friend D. I'm under a lot of pressure, Julie professed. She took a sip of her drink. Tonight I'm not a student. It's just you and me enjoying the nightlife. Julie paused. She tried, but couldn't hold back her tears anymore. In her sadness, she cried, then stopped herself, embarrassed. I'm only one of 1,000 students, yet here I'm being hit hard by the pressure of it all. Woe is me, right? Julie sat back in her chair, questioning her life choices. So the reason why this is not considered good is if we look at all the dialogue, first of all. Okay. The first thing about dialogue, let's get to, oh wait. Boop. Boop. Okay. And let's do some of the action in red so you can see. Gotta look at that red. Gotta look at that red. All right. So in this situation, oh, let me bring it down a little bit for you. I'm sorry about that. I apologize. All right. I have zero interest in going back. I'm under a lot of pressure. Tonight, I'm not a student. It's just you and me enjoying the nightlife. I'm only one of 1,000 students, yet here I'm being hit hard by the pressure of woe is me, right? Whereas in the top, I have zero interest in going back to the dorm. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Tonight, I'm not a student. I'm here enjoying the nightlife with my bestie. I'm just one of 1,000 students, yet woe is me. So, what is the big difference between this and this? Well, in this bad version, the reason it doesn't flow right is there's a lot of telling and justifying choices. So, pause. She tried, but couldn't hold back her tears anymore in her sadness. Like, why do we have to know that in her sadness she cried, then stopped herself embarrassed? Right? We don't need that. We don't need that information. It kind of it jolts the flow, right? It takes us out of the moment, and that's the thing about you want it to flow. You want your narration or your narrative, I mean, to move through the dialogue and allow the dialogue to move through the narrative. You want them to work in tandem and have a lot going on because there is a lot going on in the second version. It's much more telling. The narrative makes the flow feel less natural, and the way she's speaking is stuttered. Whereas in the first example, it's right to the point. Could it be cleaned up? Yeah, of course. All dialect can be cleaned up. This is a first pass, right? But as a starting point, we're letting a lot of it be moved by the flow and the reader's emotional experience of it by not telling and blocking the scene. This one blocks the scene a lot. There's a lot of blocking. There's a lot of telling with this, in her sadness, she cried. Well, when she cried, we know she's sad. We know she's maybe overwhelmed, whatever. We're allowing the imagination to kind of fill in the blanks, right? But her talking is so dead on. I'm only one of 1,000 students, yet here I'm being hit hard by the pressure of all. Whereas this is, I'm just one of 1,000 students, yet woe's me, right? Subtext is a powerful tool in writing. And the thing is, if I really wanted to explore the passage, I could, and I wanted to make it a little bit more chunky. Like if I was like, I really want to have some fun with that, right? Whoa. Leave that this. Let's see. This is. I pre-wrote this, but what's going on here? Woe is me, right? Woe is me. She tried but couldn't, and Julie began to stop herself. Okay. So if I wanted to, I could play with it. If I wanted to mix some of those things and I felt I wanted something to move in, I have zero interest in going back to the dorm, D. I'm under a lot of pressure, Julia said Julie. Through her drink. Tonight, I'm not a student. I'm here enjoying the nightlife with my bestie. She tried but couldn't hold back her tears anymore. Julia began to cry but stopped herself. I'm just one of 1,000 students, yet she wipes her eyes dry. What was me, right? Julia sat back in her chair. So I took this and I combined the elements that worked, but at the same time, I still allow it to breathe. I still allow it to move through itself. It's not jarring. It doesn't take you out. She tried but couldn't hold back her tears anymore. Is not. She tried but couldn't hold back her tears anymore. In her sadness, she cried, then stopped herself in embarrassment. Julia began to cry but stopped herself. Now, the reason began or start means that it's going to stop. All right. Because you're either doing it or not doing it. So Julia cried is that she's crying. Julia cried. Right. However, if we want to stop it, Julia began to cry, and then we accentuate the but stopped herself, right? Or her or D stopped her, whatever. So that's something to keep in mind too. Like instead of they started to leave the room, well, that means that something stops them, something catches their information. Anyway, boop. All right. This leads us to the next point of interest. You can create real character when what they say isn't information dumping, but moves plot and character through the story. If we go back to the other example, by the way, all right. I have zero interest in going back to the dorm, D. I'm under a lot of pressure. We create questions with that. What kind of pressure? We're not being straightforward. She's not like, I'm under pressure because I have 6 tests I have to get done. Well, what are you under pressure, right? And she's like, you know what? I'm not a student. By the way, we've already explained she's a college student. D is definitely a friend, and it's confirmed with Bestie. Tonight, she's just letting go. It's not about school. I just want to enjoy the nightlife with my bestie. I just need a break from it all. And then her realizing like, I'm. Everybody says this kind of crap. Woe is me, right? And it's very telling of who she is. It's showing you a little bit of the pressure that she's feeling, and then she's like, kind of like, why am I complaining? How many other students are dealing what I'm dealing? So it's not just information dumping. It's not a lot of exposition. There's there's a lot of subtext, but there's enough character driven information that it's pulling us through the thought process of this character and seeing them deal with something emotionally. Anyway, so you want the information a character knows or chooses to divulge to tell you a lot about them. Info dumping is more about we need the audience to know this very specific thing, and it's less about their motivations. So you want to think about, if I need the audience to know this thing, how do I create the motivation from this character to want to say it, other than, all right, let's go over the plan? Because that's not motivation per se. That's just, or my favorite is when they repeat information that they traditionally would have already had a conversation about. Like like um like if 2 lawyers are talking and they're like, well, because you submitted the paperwork for blank blank blank, and they're like, yeah, of course I did. And you're like, they know they submitted it, they submitted it. They're just letting the audience know, hey, just so you know, that paperwork is submitted, so now we don't have to show the paperwork being submitted, which is fine. I get it. It's. But the reason this is pushed back on in writing, the reason, like, It's because it's not interesting. It's not interesting, and it's considered poor storytelling when we need the audience to know something, so we just have somebody say it. And, honestly, remember that the story is not about what's cool, big, and action packed, because a lot can happen in an intimate moment or a moment where moments breathe. And a story is like a magic trick that unfolds and allows the audience to discover the lives within it. And info dumping breaks the illusion. So if you do a lot of info dumping and you do a lot of exposition, you're taking away from discovery, not only of our personal discovery to the characters, who they are, and the story, uh, but a deeper sense of the subtext and the movement of the story, instead of it just being information dumping. Um, uh, so you want to ultimately look at your dialogue as a method of purpose, other than I need the audience to see this. The purpose is the inner desire of the character, the motivation, um, that motivation, right? It fuels the purpose, right? Because uh, you have your missions and you have your purpose. Mission is your external. Like my mission is to get the thing from the room without getting caught, so so I don't go to jail. My purpose is because I want to save the world, and I became an MI agent, a Mission Impossible agent, because I believe that the security of the world, someone needs to fight for it. So that's my purpose, is to be the one who fights for it, right? Um. Anyway, all I'm saying is, instead of telling the reader everything up front, uh, or as soon as possible, think about what you're trying to accomplish. In fact, on your first draft, you can feel free to like info dump, get it all out. I mean, you're just working a story. But it's good to kind of be like, I know what needs to be said, but then you want to analyze it. What are you trying to say? And when you figure it out, now it's time to let it breathe. And what does letting it breathe mean? This means try to disperse the things they need to know naturalistically throughout the story. Take one moment, one big moment of just, here's a ton of information, here's a lot of stuff I want you to know, and you take that one moment of a much bigger reveal and spread it out. And the power of being a writer is the creative element of choosing how and when to divulge key information. Being in control of seeding your story throughout the pages will take your writing to the next level. Instead of feeling like I need to prep my audience, I need to prep the audience so there's an emotional resolve 8 chapters away. Well, why don't I seed chapter one's big reveal over the course of 7 chapters? So in the 8th chapter, now I've experienced and I've discovered this thing that becomes the emotional resolve. In fact, don't be afraid to keep your reader in the dark a little longer than you might think reasonable. You don't want an incomprehensible or incomplete story, but you want the pace to feel natural and not forced. And I see this with newbie writers. They are often far too concerned with making sure their reader knows what's right at the beginning of the story. They're just like, I need you to know this information because it's so cool. This is really great information. And, if you know this, then it'll make sense later. And you're like, but that's a lot to take in. It's easier to take it into piecemeal, and you also develop a relationship with that piecemeal. You develop a relationship with that slowly breathing, divulged information that you discover, instead of here's a huge chunk, and then for chapters, you don't hear anything really about it, maybe a whisper, but also you don't want to get to the point where you're like, oh, I got to remind him of that thing. So then you have a scene to be like, hey, let's reiterate what we had been talking about. And that's really hard on a reader. But as a writer, if you pull it along through the chapters, you're always reminding them without over reminding them. And a good rule of thumb for me is I like to have my reader, maybe 2 or 3 steps behind at the very start of my narrative. Let me repeat that. I like to have my reader, okay, 1, maybe 2 or 3 steps behind my narrative at the start. As the story unfolds, I let them catch up to keep pace in the middle. But once we get to the end of the narrative, that third act, that's when they are 1 step behind with their hand reached out. Now, of course, if they get ahead of me, I know that I did not see that story well enough and I was being too literal or divulging too much information. And then, of course, I take away the tension and stuff like that. Now, by the way, you can tell somebody, like, you can tell the audience there's a bomb under the table, as Alfred Hitchcock does. There's a bomb under the table, but the characters don't know. Well, now I know there's tension because if they don't get out of there in 40 seconds, they're going to die. That's different. Like what I say about, like, if they're ahead of me, it takes away from the discovery. Like, I don't want them to just be like, I know what's going to happen. And that's different. But knowing the bomb's going to go off in 40 seconds and the other characters don't know, that creates a nice, interesting tension. But them knowing what's going to happen takes away from the discovery process. Okay. When it comes to information, you are better off allowing your reader the chance to question things. When they see moments that intrigue them, they want answers, and that's good. Now they want to keep reading because they need the answers. But there is a certain point you will have to give them the answers, but sooner rather than later is not the key. Try using dialogue to impart key information, but make sure you do it in a subtle and interesting way. I like subtext personally. I call this the vague but informative method. If you need the reader to know that 2 characters grew up in the same city when they were younger, as it's important for the reveal later on, don't state that fact in a prose, right? It can be more effective through revealing the information through character in their dialogue than just being like, hey, these 2 people, they grew up in the, like they meet, like Dave and Rich approach each other. 2 kids from high school who grew up in high school. That's not interesting as like, you don't want to be too direct or outright. Like, you grew up in Shirley on Long Island with Dave, right? Instead, make it have more of an emotional connection. I need the drink a little. Oh, God. So to make an emotional connection, you might have it say, Dave told me you 2 were a terror on the streets of Long Island, right? Now, the second example works harder than the first. There's more going on even in that intimate moment. The second example shows us what kind of people these 2 characters are and how the person speaking might feel about them. Remember, good dialogue at its core should be doing more than one thing at a time. Because again, you grew up in Shirley on Long Island with Dave, right? That's just a fact or a statement. Dave told me you 2 were a terror on the streets of Long Island. That gives subtext, texture, character. Because you grew up in the Shirley on Long Island, whatever. There's no real, like, well, how did they grow up? Did they have a name? What's the deal with them? But Dave told me you 2 were a terror on the streets of Long Island. It's something that he might be proud of. Maybe he's like, hey, back when we were kids, no one messed with us. We're creating a character. All right, final thoughts. When you first begin writing your story, let it come as it may. The real work won't begin until after you get the story out in the first draft. It's better to see it as clear as possible before the subtext is all there. If you write the subtext great, it will definitely all be there. So, I'm so sorry. I need a drink. I need another drink. Whew. I film these in chunks, so, this ain't the first video I've done today. Okay, what I mean is sometimes you will write and believe the subtext is there because we're biased, right? But no first draft is going to be perfect. You got to use the second, third, fourth, or however many drafts you need to do the real work. And it's okay to do the real work. The work is going to be hard. It's writing. It's not easy. Like, writing is not like, oh, I got this. No matter how great you think you are, you still need to put work in to make it to make it clear and concise. What is easy though is creating the habits of doing the work a little at a time. About analyzing your writing once the first draft is complete, how to look at dialogue, etc. What is the work in a nutshell? Well, let's talk about it. Search for the fluff and meat to cut off. Well, search for the fluff to cut off the meat. It's going to be there, the pointless lead in and dribble off. Cut it off the dialogue, and you'll find your dialogue tightening up. You have to get inside the character's head. No two characters are identical. These characters are not you telling the story. They are them telling the story through you. Try to find their voice, understand it, and like playing chess against yourself, you have to be ruthless when you turn the board. You can't play to beat one side. You got to always be playing to win. So when you turn that board, you got to continue to play to win. Then you turn it again. You're like, how would I beat this move? Figure out where you can create better flow when possible. Really take a gander at your prose mixed with dialogue. And you got to be comfortable with adding and subtracting and organizing the thoughts so it flows in and out without being chunky. And finally, but not the only thing, information. When information becomes only that, information, it falls flat and becomes a dump of an experience filled with exposition. Give information life, purpose, and motivation through the characters that need to know it, want to say it, and fear to reveal it so you can discover it through them. Okay. The next video in the series will focus on how to write good dialogue compared to bad dialogue. We'll cover these topics within that video. The hope of this lesson will be to take good and bad dialogue and compare them. And once they are compared, we will work to improve the dialogue using some of the rules we have established in this particular playlist. Question: what do you love about dialogue in novels? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you like what you've watched and you have not already, please subscribe and hit that bell icon so you don't miss out. That's it. As always. How's it go? Do you know it yet? I barely know it. I don't know. As always, keep developing the right mindset. I'll see you next time. Bye. Love you all.